Good morning and welcome to the Power of Festival. This is our inaugural event and thank you for joining us today. We're going to briefly pass over to Councillor Sonia Winifred to say a few introductory words about today and our partnership for the Power of Festival. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Councillor Sonia Winifred, the Cabinet Member for Equalities and Culture here in Lambeth. So it's a huge, massive welcome to Lambeth, to all of you. We are pretty open to visitors, so welcome. It's an absolute pleasure to be here to support the Power of Festival, the importance of these festivals in Lambeth to our communities, all our communities. And I think I ought to begin by saying a huge contribution to this, I feel, is behind the scenes around the narrative of the community, but the world, because when we saw the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, this triggered a worldwide condemnation. We saw people of all ages, all colours coming together to say enough is enough. And this narrative is continued in the Power of Festival. Daniel, it is, remarkable to be doing this. And culture, art, it's so important in our lives. It gives us that sense of self, belonging, our own sense of identity. And being here today and viewing the exhibition upstairs by various young artists, the Black Lives Matter movement, all the depiction of the characters, the identities of so many of those people, it's so powerful. And I think it's something that we need to continue. I keep repeating the narrative because it continues, and I feel that everyone here today is contributing to that narrative. It's a powerful one. It's one that says we have to come together to acknowledge all our lives. Black lives matter. Our young people matter. They need to have that sense of self. They need to feel they belong, that sense of self, who we are and how we contribute to society and our communities. It's extremely important. Lambeth is striving to work, to lead in equality across our borough, to support all our communities. We don't want to leave anyone behind. So I want to thank you all today for being here, and I hope we will continue with these events because it's so important. But before I go, I do want to thank the partners in this. Daniel, again, thank you very much. Fred Perry, Farfetch, Nikon, Jack Agency, and Media Agency, and everyone else behind the scenes here today. Thank the events team. Lucy, you've done a fantastic job. And long may it continue, this partnership, because we need this. We want to continue supporting it, and it will encourage people, all our communities, young, old, to come into the town hall and to share in the culture of our communities as we move forward. So I thank you all again. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. I will stay to hear part of the contributions from these fantastic young women over there. And later on, if possible, I will try and return. But if I don't, have a wonderful day, please, and enjoy Lambeth Town Hall. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And just to say again, it's really wonderful to be here. And the Power of Festival is a celebration of Black identity for its inaugural event. And we've got three wonderful speakers joining us on stage to talk about the power of protest and how the power of protest can move things forward, especially when led by Black voices. So to welcome to the stage, we have Kuba, we have Tskenya, and we have Lavinya. Please join me on stage. Thank you very much.
Hi everybody. Thank you again to Lavinya and Tskenya for joining us here. I'm Kuba Shand Baptiste. So I wanted to start off just by saying that there is, obviously, between the last year, there has been no better word to describe what's happened than change, really. As difficult as it's been, there's been a hell of a lot of it. Some for the better, some for the worse. We've had Black Lives Matter protests, we've had Stop Asian Hate protests, Black Trans Lives Matter protests, Kill the Bill protests, and demonstrations against the hostile environment and calls to decolonise the curriculum. So though we may not feel like it, resistance is still happening. And amid that resistance, we're all trying to figure out what can be done to create lasting change. Now, two of the people who are making change that I'm sat next to are a testament to that hard work and tenacity that it takes to achieve such progress. So, without further ado, I'll introduce you both. So, Lavinya Stennett is founder and CEO of the Black Curriculum, which aims to decolonise the curriculum, reach young people in and out of schools, and improve social cohesion between young people by offering the Black history lessons many of us never had in school. It boasts patrons like England rugby player Mario Itoje, Virgil Abloh, and it's been featured in collaboration with brands such as Lush and has had media coverage pretty much everywhere. And Tskenya Frazer is the award-winning founder of Tskenya, which is a sustainable, vegan, inclusive luxury fashion brand that's free from gendered marketing, offers sizes 8 to 13, so that's good news for everyone who has big feet like me. It's been featured in Vogue, The Guardian, Tatler, Stylist, among others, and you're also a writer and business consultant. So you have many hats, both of you. But to start off with Tskenya, for those who don't know you recently relaunched with a new collection. Could you tell us more about your brand's journey, how long it took you to get to this point, and what sort of made you want to create something like this?
So something that's really important to me is sustainability and ethics. And, growing up with larger size feet, I could never find shoes that I thought represented my womanhood and my femininity. And then, obviously, those shoes were not very well made. If we could find them, they were really, really expensive. So it all came to a head when I finished university and I couldn't find shoes for my graduation dress. And I was speaking to one of my non-binary friends, and they were saying that they too struggled to find shoes in a larger size. But there was an extra layer to that they present in one particular way, but that's not exactly what their identity is. So they were going into shops and they were being misgendered, for example. And so I thought, why not I be that person to start a footwear brand that specializes in larger size shoes, that's free from gendered marketing, and anyone with that size of foot can wear those shoes and feel fabulous in those shoes. And with this new collection, I had to really take my time because we first launched in 2018, but again, the ethics weren't there, the sustainability wasn't there, the shoes are 100% recyclable now, and I'm really, really proud of that. And I guess it's the events of the last year that I decided to focus the collection around Black cultural icons and the things that they've done for us as a community. And when I say as a community, as a global community, not just for us who are members of that Black community. So that's where the brand is at now, and I'm always trying to find more ways to make it more ethical, make it more sustainable, oftentimes at the expense of profit. But I mean, for me, profit isn't important, it's just giving people the shoes they deserve.
That's amazing. And what's the sort of reception been like for people who may not have been catered to before, from various marginalised communities, who may not have been catered to, who may not have seen themselves reflected in brands like yours?
To be honest, it was really overwhelming. When I started the brand, I thought, I guess maybe because I'm the only friend that I have with larger size foot, and obviously I have lots of friends who are part of the LGBTQ plus community, I thought it was just like a small section of us that weren't being catered to. So the reception's been really overwhelming. And I think that it's that reception from a community that I'm not part of, as an ally, that keeps me going to want to keep providing this service. Because I genuinely believe that as allies to different communities, we have to raise our voice and sometimes do some of that work because they've been carrying us for a very long time. So that's one thing that keeps me going, knowing that I'm serving the LGBTQ plus community as an ally through my fashion.
Yeah, I think a lot of brands could take pointers from you on how to do that properly, I think. So I've seen a lot of disasters in the industry. But Lavinya, you launched the Black Curriculum after studying mariculture in New Zealand, I believe, while you were studying at SOAS. And then you applied for funding and launched in 2009. Could you tell me a little bit more about the journey of the Black Curriculum and what it's grown into since?
Sure. So I studied African Studies at SOAS University from 2016 to 2019. And during that time, I got a scholarship to go to New Zealand to just basically have fun over the holidays, but more importantly, just to understand, what Maori culture was, and so I went to study Indigenous kapa haka, which is like the national kind of dance, and then also Indigenous land law, because I was really kind of just interested in the place of land and kind of just thinking about liberation and rights. And so whilst I was there, it was immediately just apparent that there was a lack of not only education in our society around the missing parts of our history, but also the authenticity that comes with that. So being able to communicate some of the issues that the society was having. So I actually was not only immersed in a society where colonialism and Maori culture is talked about with such passion, but also such openness, but at the same time, understanding that this is an ongoing piece of work that just can't be solved with a simple kind of let's decolonize the curriculum or let's tick this box and, you know, simplify the movement. So I came back to the UK with a lot of passion and quite a lot of anger as well, because I think it's just been swept under the carpet for a long time. So yes, I got a bit of capital to set up the Black curriculum from the Paul Hamlin Foundation and kick-started the Black curriculum, which was a project at the time that I was just going to do to, just go into schools and support young people. But it developed because the need was there, and the reception has been great ever since.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, I feel like having such support must be incredible. Does it feel like you've sort of cracked the code? Because a lot of people have been wanting to decolonize the curriculum for a really long time, and to launch initiatives that make a difference. Do you feel like you're actually moving towards that goal in a way that hasn't been done before?
Absolutely. We are completely the forerunners in this space, because we're doing it on an institutional level. I think the difference is that it's not to say that there hasn't been any campaigns and there hasn't been any kind of integration of Black history in curriculums before, but on a national scale and thinking about, you know, attacking the government and their kind of position on that as well, we are attacking all fronts. And I think the Black curriculum is a very powerful movement for that reason. So, yeah, very pleased.
That's fantastic. And Tskenya, I wanted to ask you, some people, when they think of fashion, they don't immediately think of protest or of resistance, really. But in what ways to you do you feel like fashion can be a means of protest?
I challenge that. I think all forms of fashion is a form of resistance and protest and liberation, and for you to be able to express yourself. You know, when we think about the right to express oneself, even if we think about marginalized communities, the way in which we dress ourselves is rooted in a beautiful history, a historicity that has sometimes tried to be suppressed. So I see that dressing yourself in whatever way that you want to as a form of protest. And I can even talk about myself as like a plus size Black woman, right? There's certain things that I was told that I couldn't wear. And turning up in a miniskirt and a belly top now is a form of protest for me. And when I think about my customer base and like my allyship within the LGBTQ plus community, their clothes and being able to wear the shoes that they wear and dress themselves and adorn themselves in the garments that they are is a way for them to say that I'm here, I'm proud, I am who I am. So I would invoke everyone to think every morning when they wake up that you are representing something and you are protesting against all of these different structures that have been inflicted on you, whether that be, you know, fat phobia or sizeism or all these other different things, all these other structures that tell you you can't dress that way because you're a woman or you're a queer person or you're a man. To see every day as a chance to protest for your rights to exist and for your identity too.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And I guess as Black people as well, I guess fashion has played so many different roles in how we're perceived.
Right.
We reclaim things, we style things differently, and sometimes in ways that see us penalised by society. Yeah. So that's a huge connection there, definitely.
And to have the pride and freedom and strength to be able to do that anytime. So obviously the line of work that I'm in outside of running the business is like diversity inclusion. So when I feel ramped up about something that's going on in the world, I've got like the longest Ghana braids in. Do you know what I mean? And for me, that's an extra level of my protest and of my identity and the historicity of my people. So, yeah.
That's beautiful. Couldn't put it better myself. And what about you? In terms of education, how do you view that as a means of protest or as a means of changing the system, I suppose?
I find the kind of backdrop of what we're trying to work against quite ironic in the most simple way, we're asking for basic things. Putting Black history in the curriculum is not an extra ask, it's not an addition. It is basically thinking about allowing our history books to be accurate and be told in a very rounded and also truthful way. So it's almost like a lot of these protests and asks that we have within education are very simple. And I think that is the irony of this, is that the pushback that we are receiving, and also kind of different parts of civic society, the parts that they are campaigning for, often have the most kind of resistance towards them. And it's for me, it's really important that within education, we do kind of take front and center that space of actually thinking about what the future could look like. And so at the Black curriculum, we actually have been not only just thinking about that, but also kind of working with other organizations and other young people as well to just mobilize better. I think the last year has definitely kind of amplified a lot of the movements that existed before, but at the same time kind of pushed us into a space where I personally don't think there's been a lot of change. I think there's been a lot more awareness of subjects, and I think that is just the intersection of protest and technology, in that it kind of subsumes everything and makes it look a lot bigger. But yeah, on practical levels, there's still kind of a lot of work that needs to be done. So within education, I'd say that, you know, having teachers and having people at the front lines and the forefront of young people being able to integrate that learning into their actual everydays is the most important part of this. Yeah,
definitely. And if you have other initiatives that are doing similar things, I feel like there's been this explosion of either movements or sort of drives for new books to be put in new schools. And I feel like things, as you say, haven't changed overnight, but it almost seems as if we want it so bad that we almost hope a year later things would be completely different. But do you think that this is proving to be a lasting message for the public?
I hope so. I definitely feel like there is, particularly with the cause that we're aiming to achieve, there is a long-standing kind of passion for this, and I don't see people backing down anytime soon. As I said, because of these asks, the fact that they're very simple, make it more important, I think, to just keep your foot on the pedal, because if you take your foot off, it's like there's young people's lives and futures at stake, and that for me is the most important thing. It's not just being able to have your voice heard by the government. That's not the ultimate goal, it's a milestone, but I think ultimately it's for those young people, and so we have to keep going.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I've got a question for both of you. You've both worked with the government, various initiatives, to support up-and-coming people in your industries. What do you say to people who think doing so means having to compromise your ideals in any way? So if you could just talk about what you've done and why that's not the case.
With this kind of radical work, there's no space for compromising your ideals. And like you were saying, a lot of these arcs are really, really easy, simple arcs. But it's the fact that people don't want to surrender the things that they've always known, their privilege, and to actually make things more equitous for marginalized communities. So, working as a diversity and inclusion director, there's always this angst to, improve the amount of Black and ethnic people that you see at the hierarchy of the chain at the top of the pyramid. And the comeback is always, we can't do it. It's too difficult. What if we hire one more manager? What if we do all this? And I think that when you go forward and when you want to talk about radical change, you have to be very clear that it is radical. If we do want to have real systemic change, then it requires for you to give up your seat at the table, for example, as a white, cis, heterosexual man, or you're going to weaponize that privilege in order to help people from different communities, whether they be Black, whether they be women, whether they be part of the LGBTQ+ community. So I'm very, very against compromising ideals, because I think it says something about your message, and that it's maybe not so important, but that it's not meant to be fulfilled in the way that it's meant to. And by sticking to those ideals, and there being no movement, shows people that you're serious. Yeah. Because in order to change society, we need radical action.
What about you, Lavinya? What do you think?
Completely agree. And I also feel like as a Black-led organisation, as Black people, please don't place me in a box. I think there's this expectation or understanding that if you're kind of grassroots or if you're, a collective, you can't work with the government, you can't, get money. So, okay, so how are we going to change things? How are things going to ever kind of have a large-scale impact without the interjection of capital, without stakeholders from government actually being behind your cause? And I think over the past few years, I've actually seen the importance of having those parties. But I think within that process, you absolutely need to kind of what I found is that we have to protect what we're doing and not allow that to kind of be influenced by different stakeholders, such as the government. Also, money as well, I think, definitely kind of it doesn't confuse, but it adds another kind of it adds to the moving picture. Right. And I think you have to be able to kind of rein it back to your ultimate goal and your vision, which is, again, for us, empowering those young people with a sense of identity and belonging. So I think, yes, I think your ideals, they're not compromised, but you absolutely have to. If you want change, you're going to have to include a number of people in that. And
collaboration.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely. And I guess you'd been in contact with Gavin Williamson, the Education Secretary, who rejected the idea that we needed to change the curriculum because it's already incredibly diverse, in his words. What do you say to that? You've carried on, obviously, despite that. You could have gone and said, well, the government said no. So that's that.
Yeah, so our initial request was, we wrote a letter to Gavin Williamson, Secretary of State for Education, to change the national curriculum. The reason we're asking for the national curriculum to be changed, even though 75% of schools don't follow the national curriculum, there is still a sense of urgency when it comes to having a very symbolic message from the government to say, Black history is British history. We're going to put examples that are not just about slavery on the curriculum. So for us, that's really, it's important for the social message that it sends. So when we wrote the letter back in June, he responded on the 29th and was just like, yeah, we've got Mary C. Cole, and we have got in Key Stage 2 the option for African empires to be taught, but the fact is that many teachers are not teaching it. So we need more kind of rounded and inclusive examples on there. In terms of the response, I kind of expected it. I don't think that they will budge this year at all. Particularly in the end of the letter, what kind of shocked me was that he said COVID is preventing us from meeting.
Right.
We have Zoom, we have Skype, we have FaceTime. I mean, there's so many different means, and I think I think what that symbolizes, and I would like to talk about this more, is the kind of fear that the government has around kind of change, especially when it comes from young people and is about young people as well. So yeah, not surprised at all.
No, I don't think many of us were, really. I mean, what do you think that it is about resistance that makes people so afraid of giving up power?
Again, it's privilege, right? Is that if things have worked so perfectly for you and haven't inflicted your life or affected the ways in which you can live, you're afraid that if you relinquish some of that power, what will your life look like, right? And I think that's the most difficult thing, and that's where allyship lies. And I go so far to say being a good person, to realize that, okay, this is not really important to me, not even in terms of Black curriculum, but in things in general, but it's important to this section of society. So it's important for me to highlight that, amplify that, and if I do have a large seat, to give voice to that, or call in other people to give voice to that too. It's such a difficult one, and I don't know why they consider it to be this word, resistance, when really it's just asking for things to be equal and for there to be real inclusion and for there to be real equity, for people to be able to stand on a stage and be heard in the same way. So it's just such a difficult one. I'd love to know the psychology of it. I'm pretty sure there's psychologists who have done work on that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, the idea of, I guess there's a fear of a threat that isn't actually there. That's how I always see it, of people being afraid that we're going to take something away as opposed to just giving everyone a piece of the pie, because we can do that.
If you think from a historical standpoint, that's what those dominant cultures or communities have done, is they've taken for themselves and never given to anybody else. And I guess also in the space of VC and business, this is a big conversation that VCs are having at the moment, because they're saying, if you give all of this capital to Black founders, how does that benefit me if they're going to be pumping this into their community and they're serving their community? I'm not going to get anything from this. There's I think that there's this worry that if you give to marginalized communities, they're going to repeat history in the same way that we've seen history played out, where you're going to subjugate, you're going to separate, and you're going to oppress communities that aren't part of that. But I argue that we're not about that.
No.
It's all about equity for us.
Definitely. I also wanted to ask you about your book, Quick Thing on Business. Woohoo! As part of that a Quick Thing on series, which sort of works to sort of demystify various aspects of Black life, I guess, in Britain. Could you just tell me a little bit more about that and how business and sort of protest, I guess, can go hand in hand?
So when you said book, I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to finish it. So I'm writing part of an A Quick Thing On series. And like you say, it's all of these different fantastic books about different parts of like Black British culture. And so I'm writing about Black British business. And obviously growing up, I knew of Oprah maybe, but I didn't really know that Black British enterprise has been here since like the 15th century, right? And we were leaders in core, we were leaders in in commerce, all these different aspects. So as I've been researching the book, I mean, again, that's a form of protest because people don't ever want to think about Black folk having like an equity-led history in the UK. They don't know about it. No. We're not taught about it. And so as I'm writing about it, I'm uncovering so much about the history of Britain, so much about the history of Black people in Britain, and the ways in which we've contributed to the economy, not in terms of just like building Britain into the space it is now, but also being thought leaders too, and seeing the way that's linked back into like our historicity in like Western Africa. And, you know, there's a chapter in the book where I talk about, you know, Black women being the definition of entrepreneurship. Because you think about Western Africa, they had like the market women of Western Africa. And these women who had stalls, did tradings, were like the first people to kind of do, I guess, an example of like the stock market on grains and changing the price every day depending on what yield there was. And so looking at that history and seeing who we were as business leaders, and essentially some of those kind of like basal entrepreneurs, right, has been really, really interesting.
No, I can imagine. And that ties pretty much into what you're doing. It all connects.
All history.
It all connects. So I wanted to ask you, Lavinya, about the fact that you created and developed an electoral roll communications project for Lambeth. Could you just talk more about that and tell me about it?
Okay, so when where was I? I was in my second year of uni, and first year of uni, and I just needed something to enable me to just work and see what life was about on the side. And I always have had some kind of ambition to work within government. That's definitely changed now that I'm in that curriculum. But at the time, I was so interested. I reached out to Jean, who was kind of heading up like an aspect of Lambeth, and literally I think I spent like 6 weeks in between two projects, so one in Lambeth Council and then another with an organisation that was funded by Lambeth, and literally just was trying to kind of get communities, this was their objective, to get particularly Somali and Portuguese communities to vote, and so I spent a lot of time kind of thinking about how we could approach that. Then also kind of recruiting and also kind of directly speaking to members of the public as well to get them, I guess, to think about being involved more in civic society as part of the process. So, yeah.
No, that's incredible. I mean, do you feel like it gave you more of a taste of what it was like to work in that environment?
Yes, it did. It really did. In a way where I think it showed me again the stark reality of what, working within kind of not only a government kind of entity looks like, but then also where people like me sit within that.
Right.
And I am blessed to have met a lovely woman called Grace Gabadamosi, and she was actually the person who showed me Paul Hamlin, which is where I got the grant from to develop the Black curriculum. But she was mentoring me, and she helped kind of develop a lot of the kind of understandings that I had at the time. Someone who was really passionate at the time of working within a space like this. But I think, it was important to have someone who could show me the reality, but also be really kind of frank and open with me about other possibilities that were outside of this as well.
No, definitely. Yeah. And I wanted to ask, we talked kind of briefly before about some of the pledges that businesses were making after global Black Lives Matter protests last year.
Yeah.
And working with businesses for your consultancy. What's that been like? Have you seen lots of the same mistakes?
It's been a very challenging year, because obviously a lot of these calls to action that business have been asked for, they've been asked for many, many years. So that means, making sure that, very simply, your workplace there's no patriarchy, there's no racism, there's no homophobia, which for me, obviously, as a practitioner in the space, seems like a very easy thing, because all of those steps to making it that way are quite simple and quite easy too. So it's been an overwhelming year of companies, coming to me and asking for ways to make it more diverse. And I always push back and say that diversity is about numbers, right? So we can very easily get more Black, queer managers, or a CFO who is an Asian queer man. It's very easy to do that. You can do that with almost kind of like affirmative action hiring. But the diversity of things, I always say, is the quantitative, and then the inclusion and the equity is the qualitative. It's about how you make people feel. It's about how you drive culture. And those things take a lot of time, and it also takes commitment. And again, it takes radical action, right? And over the past year, a lot of organizations have wanted it right now. Yeah. They want their Black employees to say, I feel safe at work right now. How can I change this next week? How can I change this next month? But it's literally a step at a time for it to get to a place where workplaces are more equitous. And it requires radical action from the CEO. For me, my mum always says to me, and I'm sure it's like an old Caribbean saying, that, a fish rots from the head down. Right. So if you haven't got a leader who actually understands all these concepts of why diversity, inclusion, equity are important, the organization's not going to change. And then there's also that problem of things being a performance, right? I think that the tragic murder of George Floyd happened in such a unique time of COVID, where people were locked at home, people had to ruminate with what had happened, versus the fact that, Black people have been killed by the police since the beginning of time, right? Systemically racist organization, that's just how that works. But the fact that people couldn't go for brunch with the girls at 12, see a video of someone murdered and go for brunch with the girls, had to really think about society and all these systemic factors. So I think that, it's a balance of making sure things aren't performative, and it requires leaders to make that pledge. And I'm hopeful that leaders have made that pledge and they're working towards that. But we'll have to wait and see. But I think we're going in the right direction, because we're kind of seeing that reverse psychology of it being, leaders watching their employees. But now it's employees and the customers watching the leader, wanting to know, what's the organization saying about this? What's your social stance? And for so long, companies and organizations have swayed away from politics. And sociological things happen in society because they don't want to affect the bottom line, they don't want to affect money. But we're now the people making that decision for you. So if you don't speak up, we ain't going to buy from you.
Exactly. That's such a great way to put it. We're sort of running out of time, but I wanted to ask you both what you would say to people who want to make a change in some way, want to embark on a new endeavor that helps people, but are too afraid or don't feel as if they have the tools or the knowledge?
Well, I think firstly, one thing that you do have, regardless of tools, regardless of access, is a voice. And I think for me, especially when I was in university, my voice was my tool. It was the way that I was only able to communicate the things that I saw were objectively wrong, and also to mobilize other people who felt the same but just didn't know kind of where to gauge. And I think in an age of where we are using, I think quite arbitrarily, social media, being able to articulate in person with people some of the issues that you are seeing has an effect that can actually produce more long-lasting change, because not only have you been able to kind of put a physical reality to a problem, but you've also been able to influence somebody else's kind of mind. And then also that's given you the kind of basis for extra work to be done. So I'd say don't feel like you don't have at all, and don't wait till you have money or don't wait till you have a platform like this to be able to then start talking about things. So that's the first thing. And I think secondly as well, being able to have a direct approach when it comes to campaigning and also protesting. Don't feel or don't think about it in a way where you're unable to articulate a series of problems. If you feel like there's one thing there within that you want to focus on, just focus on that one thing, because more often than not, we're doing too much. And I think it's difficult to achieve one objective when you've got so many different asks. I think the reason why the Black curriculum has been so successful in our appeal and our approach is because we're asking for one thing. So really kind of find that thing and nail it, and really just ask yourself why. Keep going deeper into that thing. So yeah, use your voice and find that one area.
No, that's incredible advice, and I hope people are listening out there. And what about you, Tskenya?
I definitely agree about finding a voice and having like a very strategic focus. But also for me, a really important thing is community. So even if you feel like you're the only person with this idea that you find this wrong, go out there and seek out other people. The internet is a really great source. And if it means that you have to talk to someone maybe at the local bus stop and see if they have the same views as you, that's one perfect way to go about it. And one thing I wish that someone had told me on this journey is self-preservation. So as you're raising your voice, as you're doing all of this work, make sure that you're making time for you. And in the famous words, you're reclaiming your time at times. Because if your cup is not full, you can't pour into others. You're not worth it. You're not useful to anybody. So self-preservation and finding community for me.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. And I wanted to ask you both, before we go, how we can support you, where we can find you. Lavinya, if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. So first place ahead is the Black Curriculum's website, which is theblackcurriculum.com, and you'll find all the projects that we're doing with teachers, young people. We have a springboard program that is running in 5 cities this year, so Bristol, Birmingham, Liverpool, Manchester, London, every month for young people aged 11 to 16, and it's giving them Black history music, so you can find that on blackcurriculum.com. Twitter is Curriculum Black. Instagram is the Black Curriculum, and then my personal Instagram is Gotta Be Lavinya. You can just Google my name and you'll find it.
God,
So
I
yeah,
love that pun.
Yeah. What about you, Tskenya?
So to find the business, you can find it just at tskenya.co, and that is the same for all social media. And please just urge anybody that you know with large-sized feet to come to us, because we're driving that forward, especially if you have any queer friends and family or colleagues. That would be great too. And you can find my personal Instagram and social media at Tskenya Sarah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. It's lovely talking to you both.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you. I'm a fan of both of you, so this is amazing.
We're a fan of you.
Oh, love. Okay, well, thank you both for joining me. It's been an incredible chat, and I hope this inspires someone to go out and make the change that they should.
do it.
Fingers crossed.
Your skin is just glowing. The light is just...